The starship Odyssey drifted silently through the endless void of space, its once bright engines now dimmed to a faint glow. Inside, the mood was heavy, weighed down by despair and uncertainty. Captain Daniel Carter sat in the command chair, staring at the blank screens that had once displayed messages from Earth. The communication system was dead, and so was their hope of rescue. They were alone, millions of miles away from home, with no way to call for help. Rachel Monroe, the ship's engineer, worked tirelessly in the corner of the bridge, her hands moving over tools and wires as she tried to fix what was broken. Her face was pale, dark circles underlining her tired eyes. She hadn't slept properly in days, but she refused to give up. "If I can just reroute the power grid," she muttered to herself, though no one else seemed to hear. Jacob Hayes stood nearby, leaning against the wall. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable, but there was a deep sadness behind his usually calm demeanor. As the medic, he was used to dealing with injuries and illness, but this helplessness was something he couldn't cure. Emily Dawson sat at a console near the window, gazing out at the stars. She was young, barely into her 20s, and this was her first mission beyond Earth's solar system. She had dreamed of adventure, of discovering new worlds and making history. But now, all she felt was fear. What if they never made it back? What if this was where her story ended? She clenched her fists tightly, trying to push those thoughts away. "Anything new?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the strain in it. He wasn't just their captain. He was their leader, the one who kept them going when everything fell apart. "No," Rachel replied without looking up. "Still nothing. It's like we've been forgotten." Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we have," he said quietly. "Earth has its own problems. Maybe they decided we weren't worth saving." Daniel shot him a sharp look. "Don't say that. We're not giving up. Not yet." But doubt lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. The crew had been stranded for weeks after a catastrophic malfunction during their exploration of an uncharted sector. Their mission had been simple: map the region, collect data, and return home safely. No one expected disaster to strike so suddenly. A rogue asteroid field had damaged the ship's hull, crippling their navigation systems and cutting off their connection to Earth. Now they were adrift, running low on food and fuel, with no clear path forward. Tensions were rising among the crew. Arguments broke out over trivial things: a misplaced tool, a miscalculated ration, and tempers flared easily. Even Emily, who was usually quiet and reserved, snapped at Rachel during one heated exchange. "You don't know everything," she shouted before storming off to her quarters. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. She didn't blame Emily for being upset. None of them had signed up for this. Despite the growing friction, Daniel did his best to keep morale alive. Every day he gathered the crew for updates, even if there wasn't much to report. He reminded them of their training, their skills, and their shared goal of survival. "We're still here," he told them firmly. "As long as we're breathing, we have a chance." Yet, as another day passed without progress, the weight of their situation pressed harder on each of them. The vast emptiness outside the windows felt more oppressive than ever, a constant reminder of how far they were from home. They clung to the fragile hope that someone, somewhere, would find them. Until then, all they could do was wait and pray that they wouldn't be left for dead forever. Days turned into weeks, and the crew of the Odyssey continued their desperate search for a way out of their predicament. Rachel Monroe spent most of her time running scans of nearby star systems, hoping to find anything, any sign of life, resources, or even just a safe place to land. The ship's sensors were old and damaged, but she refused to give up. She knew that sitting idle would only make things worse. One evening, as the rest of the crew rested or tried to distract themselves from their grim reality, Rachel noticed something unusual on one of the screens. At first, she thought it was a glitch, a faint blip that flickered in and out of view, but when she adjusted the settings and focused the scan, the signal became clearer. It wasn't coming from a planet exactly, but rather from a small, barren, Moon orbiting a massive gas giant. The reading showed traces of energy emissions, weak but definitely artificial. "Daniel," Rachel called out, her voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "You need to see this." Captain Daniel Carter hurried over, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "Energy signatures, are you sure?" "I'm sure," Rachel replied. "It's faint, but it's there. Could be some kind of structure or maybe even technology we can use." Jacob Hayes joined them, leaning over Rachel's shoulder to get a better look. "Do you think it's alien?" he asked, his tone neutral but laced with unease. "It has to be," Emily Dawson chimed in, stepping closer. Her face lit up with curiosity despite the fear that had been weighing on her. "We're in uncharted space. If it's not human, then what else could it be?" Daniel hesitated. Exploring an unknown location carried risks, especially given the state of their ship and crew. But staying put wasn't an option either. They were running out of time. "We'll check it out," he decided finally. "If there's even a slim chance this could help us, we have to take it." The journey to the moon took longer than expected, as the Odyssey's engines sputtered and groaned under the strain. When they finally arrived, the sight outside the windows was bleak. The surface was covered in gray dust and jagged rocks, with no signs of vegetation or water. Yet in the distance, partially buried beneath layers of debris, stood the remnants of a towering structure. Its design was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Smooth, angular panels jutted out at odd angles, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. "This doesn't feel right," Jacob muttered as they prepared to land. His hand hovered near the holster of his sidearm, though he doubted it would do much against whatever might be waiting for them. Once on the ground, the team donned their suits and ventured outside. The air was thin, almost non-existent, and the ID temperature was brutally cold. As they approached the structure, Emily's heart raced with a mix of awe and dread. Up close, the building seemed ancient, its surface etched with strange symbols that pulsed faintly with the same eerie glow. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the walls humming softly with latent power. "This is incredible," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "Whoever built this must have been incredibly advanced." Rachel nodded, already inspecting a panel filled with intricate mechanisms. "If we can figure out how to activate this, it might be able to repair our ship or at least send a distress signal." But not everything felt right. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Shadows seemed to move where there shouldn't be any, and the hum of the machinery grew louder, almost like a warning. Jacob paused, glancing back toward the entrance. "Something's off," he said quietly. "We should be careful." No one argued. Despite the potential for salvation, a gnawing sense of unease settled over them. This place held secrets and dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. Still, they pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere within these alien ruins lay the key to their survival. As the crew of the Odyssey worked deeper into the alien structure, the air grew heavier with an unshakable sense of dread. The walls seemed to close in around them, their glowing patterns pulsing erratically as if alive. Rachel Monroe focused, intently on a control panel near the center of the room, her gloved hands carefully manipulating the strange levers and switches. She didn't understand the symbols etched into the surface, but she could feel the hum of energy beneath her fingertips. It was powerful, too powerful, and it made her uneasy. Jacob Hayes stood nearby, his eyes scanning the shadows that danced along the edges of the room. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every sound, the faint creak of metal, the soft scrape of boots against the floor, set his nerves on edge. "This place feels wrong," he said under his breath, gripping his weapon tighter. "We should get out while we still can." Emily Dawson ignored him, too absorbed in examining the intricate carvings on the walls. Her mind raced with questions. Who had built this? What purpose did it serve? And why had it been abandoned? She traced her fingers over the symbols, feeling a strange warmth radiating from them. For a moment she thought she heard a whisper, a faint voice speaking in a language she couldn't understand. She froze, her heart pounding. Was it real or was her imagination playing tricks on her? "Did you hear that?" she asked, turning to the others. Her voice wavered slightly. Rachel glanced up briefly before returning to her work. "Hear what?" "That sound, like someone talking." Jacob frowned. Probably just the wind outside, or maybe the machinery shifting. But his tone lacked conviction. He had felt it too. The creeping sensation of something lurking just beyond their sight. Captain Daniel Carter entered the room then, his expression grim. "How's it going?" he asked, though his gaze lingered on the dark corners of the chamber. "We're making progress," Rachel replied, trying to sound confident. "I think I can reroute some of this power back to the ship, but it's complicated. These systems are nothing like ours." Before Daniel could respond, a sharp noise echoed through the corridor behind them. A metallic clang followed by the unmistakable sound of movement. Everyone froze, their heads snapping toward the entrance. The silence that followed was deafening. "What was that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll check it out," Jacob said, stepping forward cautiously. His hand tightened around his weapon as he moved toward the doorway. The others followed close behind, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust covering the ground. The hallway stretched ahead of them, dimly lit by the same pulsating glow that illuminated the main chamber. Shadows flickered unnaturally, twisting and writhing as if alive. Jacob stopped abruptly, his breath catching in his throat. There on the wall were deep gouges, claw-like marks carved into the metal. They were fresh. "This isn't natural," he murmured, running his fingers over the grooves. "Something's been here recently." Daniel stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We need to stay alert. Whatever made these, it might still be around." No sooner had he spoken than a scream pierced the air, a high-pitched, panicked cry that sent chills down their spines. It came from deeper within the structure, farther than they had explored. Without hesitation, they rushed toward the source, their fear momentarily overridden by concern for whoever, or whatever, was in trouble. When they arrived, they found chaos. One of the junior crew members, Kyle, was missing. His equipment lay scattered across the floor and drag marks led away into the darkness. Panic spread quickly among the group. "He wouldn't just wander off," Rachel insisted, her voice trembling. "Something took him." Jacob scanned the area, his grip tightening on his weapon. "We need to leave, now." But Emily hesitated, staring at the trail of marks leading into the depths of the ruins. "What if he's still alive? We can't just abandon him." Daniel placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We won't last long if we split up. We have to think about everyone's safety, not just one person." Reluctantly, Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. As they began retracing their steps, the whispers returned, louder this time, almost taunting. None of them spoke as they hurried back toward the entrance, their hearts pounding with the certainty that they were not alone. Something was watching them, waiting, and it wasn't done yet. Back aboard the Odyssey, the mood was somber. The loss of Kyle weighed heavily on everyone, and the eerie whispers from the alien ruins lingered in their minds like a haunting melody. Rachel Monroe worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, piecing together what she had learned from the strange technology they'd discovered. Her hands moved quickly, but her thoughts were clouded with doubt. Could they really trust this alien machinery? What if it was dangerous? What if it caused more harm than good? Emily Dawson sat nearby, staring at the glowing components Rachel had salvaged. She couldn't stop thinking about Kyle. His scream echoed in her memory, sharp and desperate. She felt responsible somehow, as though she should have done more to help him. But guilt wasn't the only thing eating away at her. The symbols etched into the alien devices seemed familiar now, almost like fragments of a dream she couldn't quite remember. Every time she looked at them, a cold shiver ran down her spine. "This doesn't feel right," Emily said suddenly, breaking the silence. "What if we're making a mistake? What if this thing is meant to hurt us?" Rachel paused, glancing up from her work. We don't have a choice, she replied firmly. If we don't try to use this tech, we'll die out here anyway. But what if it's not just a tool? Emily pressed, her voice rising. What if it's a weapon? Those claw marks, the whispers, it's all connected. We can't just ignore that. Daniel Carter entered the room then, his expression unreadable. He had been listening to their argument from the doorway. We're running out of options, he said evenly. If there's even a chance this can save us, we have to take it. Jacob Hayes stood off to the side, arms crossed. His usual calm. Demeanor was gone, replaced by frustration and anger. And what happens when it backfires? He snapped. Kyle's gone because we underestimated whatever's out there. Are you willing to risk losing someone else? The tension in the room crackled like static electricity. No one wanted to admit it, but Jacob had a point. They were gambling with lives, and the stakes were higher than ever. Yet Daniel's resolve didn't waver. I won't let fear dictate our decisions, he said firmly. We came here to survive, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Later that night, Emily found herself unable to sleep. The weight of the day's events pressed down on her chest, suffocating. She crept back to the engineering bay, determined to prove her suspicions. As she examined the alien components, her fingers brushed against a hidden switch. A panel slid, open, revealing a core pulsing with an intense, unnatural light. It was beautiful and terrifying. Her heart raced as she realized the truth. This wasn't just a power source. It was designed to amplify energy far beyond anything humans could control. If activated improperly, it could destroy the ship, or worse. Fear gripped her, but so did determination. She couldn't let the others make such a reckless decision. Quietly, she began tampering with the device, subtly altering its connections to render it unusable. By the time Rachel returned to check on her progress, Emily had already slipped away, leaving behind no trace of her sabotage. When Rachel noticed the changes, she confronted Emily immediately. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp, with accusation. "I had to," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's too dangerous. We can't trust it." Rachel stared at her, torn between fury and understanding. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The alien structure on the moon was reacting. The energy readings were spiking. Dangerously. "We need to leave," Jacob shouted over the comm system. "Now!" Chaos erupted as the crew scrambled to prepare for departure, but time was against them. From the darkness of space, something stirred, a massive shape emerging from the shadows near the moon. It wasn't natural, it wasn't friendly, and it was heading straight for them. In the midst of the panic, Jacob volunteered to stay behind. "I'll hold it off," he said grimly. "You guys get out of here." "No," Daniel protested, but Jacob cut him off. "It's the only way," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Go, now." With heavy hearts, the remaining crew launched the Odyssey into space, leaving Jacob, and whatever horrors awaited him, behind. As the ship accelerated, none of them dared to look back. They had escaped, but the cost of their survival would haunt them forever. The Odyssey hurtled through space, its damaged engines groaning under the strain as the crew tried to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the moon. The weight of Jacob's sacrifice hung over them like a dark cloud, his final words replaying in their minds. He had stayed behind to buy them time, knowing full well he might not survive. Each of them felt the loss deeply, but there was no time to grieve. Survival was still uncertain. Rachel Monroe worked frantically at her station, rerouting power to keep the ship running. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to focus. "We need to stabilize the core," she muttered, glancing at the readings on her screen. The alien components they'd salvaged were unstable, their energy fluctuating wildly. If they didn't act quickly, the entire system could overload. Emily Dawson sat nearby, guilt gnawing at her insides. She had sabotaged the alien device thinking she was doing the right thing, but now she wasn't so sure. What if Jacob's sacrifice had been for nothing? What if they couldn't escape after all? She clenched her fists tightly, trying to push the thoughts away. Captain Daniel Carter stood on the bridge, staring out at the endless void of space. His face was pale, his jaw tense. He had lost too many people already. First Kyle, now Jacob. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he knew he couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. "Status report," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're holding together," Rachel replied, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. "But we're running out of options if we don't find help soon." She didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what she meant. Without assistance, the Odyssey wouldn't last much longer. Its systems were failing, and the crew was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Just as despair began to settle over them, a faint signal appeared on the ship's sensors. At first, Rachel thought it was another glitch, but when she adjusted the settings, the signal grew stronger. It wasn't coming from Earth. It was something else entirely. "Commander," she called out, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "There's a fleet approaching, multiple ships heading straight for us." Daniel hurried over, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "Can you identify them?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet, but they're moving, fast." The crew braced themselves, unsure whether this new development was a blessing or a curse. Moments later, the ships came into view. Sleek, powerful vessels with Earth's insignia emblazoned on their hulls. A wave of relief washed over the crew as they realized they weren't alone anymore. A communication channel opened, and a gruff but commanding voice filled the bridge. "This is Commander Lucas Bennett of the Earth Defense Fleet. Identify yourselves." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "This is Captain Daniel Carter of the Odyssey. We're stranded and in need of immediate assistance." There was a pause before Bennett responded. "Hold your position, we're sending a recovery team." As the fleet surrounded the Odyssey, offering protection and support, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered back to life. But their relief was short-lived. Bennett's next word sent a chill through the room. "You're in Krylos territory," he warned. "They won't let you go without a fight." The Krylos, a brutal alien race known for their ruthlessness, were infamous across the galaxy. They enslaved entire civilizations, showing no mercy to those who crossed their path. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had escaped one nightmare, only to find themselves facing another. "We'll get you home," Bennett assured them, his tone firm. "But it won't be easy. Prepare for battle." As the fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace, Daniel addressed his crew. "We've made it this far," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We're not giving up now. Stay sharp and trust each other." Though fear lingered in their hearts, the crew nodded in agreement. They had faced impossible odds before, and somehow they had survived. With Earth's warriors by their side, they dared to believe they might make it home after all. But the journey ahead promised to be anything but easy. The fleet led by Commander Lucas Bennett moved swiftly through space, with the Odyssey tucked safely in the center. The crew aboard the small ship watched as the sleek Earth vessels surrounded them, their weapons charged and ready. For the first time in weeks, they felt a glimmer of safety. But that feeling was short-lived. The Krylos were not far behind. It started with a sudden flash of light, a burst of energy that lit up the darkness of space. Alarms blared across the fleet as dozens of Krylos ships emerged from hyperspace, their jagged, insect-like designs bristling with weapons. They wasted no time opening fire immediately. Explosions erupted around the fleet, sending shockwaves through the void. Rachel Monroe gripped her console tightly as the Odyssey shook violently. "They're targeting us," she shouted over the chaos. "We can't take much more of this." "Stay calm," Daniel Carter ordered, his voice firm despite the fear in his eyes. He turned to Bennett's ship on the view screen. "Commander, we need cover." "We're working on it," Bennett replied, his tone clipped but steady. "Hold your position." The battle raged on, a storm of lasers and missiles lighting up the blackness of space. The Earth ships fought fiercely, their pilots skilled and determined. But the Kralos were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. One by one, the human vessels took hits, their shields flickering dangerously low. Jacob Hayes' sacrifice suddenly felt heavier than ever. Without him, they might not have made it this far. Now, they had to fight for every second of survival. Rachel worked furiously at her station, using the alien technology they'd salvaged to boost the Odyssey's defenses. "I'm rerouting power to the shields," she said, her hands flying over the controls. "It's not perfect, but it'll buy us some time." Emily Dawson stood nearby, clutching the back of a chair for support. Her guilt over sabotaging the device had faded, replaced by determination. She wasn't going to let Jacob's sacrifice be in vain. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. "Help me monitor the energy levels," Rachel replied without looking up. "If anything spikes, we need to shut it down before it fries the system." As the battle intensified, Jacob's bravery inspired the rest of the crew. Even Emily found strength she didn't know she had, calling out warnings and updates as the ship rocked under enemy fire. Daniel remained on the bridge, issuing orders and keeping everyone focused. "We're not losing anyone else," he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "Stay sharp." Commander Bennett led the charge, his flagship unleashing a barrage of firepower that crippled several Krylos ships. But the aliens kept coming, their forces seemingly endless. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Bennett executed a daring maneuver. He ordered his ships to form a tight formation around the Odyssey, creating a protective barrier as they prepared to jump into hyperspace. "Hang on," Daniel yelled, as the fleet activated their hyperdrive engines. The Krylos ships gave chase, firing wildly, but it was too late. In a flash of blinding light, the fleet vanished, leaving the enemy behind. When the shaking stopped and the stars reappeared outside the windows, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They weren't safe yet. Hyperspace travel was risky, with their damaged ship, but they had survived the worst of it. Daniel looked around at his crew, his heart swelling with pride. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. Together they had faced unimaginable odds and come out the other side. It wasn't over, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they dared to believe they might actually make it home. The battered fleet emerged from hyperspace near Earth's orbit, limping home after a harrowing journey. The Odyssey drifted alongside the larger ships, its hull scarred, and its systems barely holding together. For the crew aboard, the sight of their home planet brought tears to their eyes. After everything they had endured, the isolation, the terror, the loss, it was almost too much to believe they were finally back. As they approached, a message came through from Earth's command center. "Welcome home," a warm voice said, over the comm system. "You're safe now." The words hit Daniel Carter like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what they had survived. He turned to his crew, his voice thick with emotion. "We made it," he said softly. "Against all odds, we made it." Rachel Monroe sat at her station, staring out at the blue-green orb growing larger in the window. Her hands still trembled, slightly, but there was a sense of peace in her expression. She had done everything she could to keep the ship running, and now, her hard work had paid off. Emily Dawson stood beside her, tears streaming down her face as she whispered a silent thank you to Jacob Hayes. His sacrifice had saved them all, and she vowed never to forget him. Commander Lucas Bennett's flagship pulled alongside the Odyssey, and moments later he appeared on the view screen. His face was weary but triumphant. "You've been through hell," he said, addressing the crew. "But you didn't give up. That's what makes humanity strong. We fight for each other, no matter the cost." Daniel nodded, gratitude swelling in his chest. "We couldn't have done it without you and your team," he replied. "Thank you." When the Odyssey docked at the orbital station, the crew stepped onto solid ground for the first time in months. They were greeted by cheers and applause from the station's personnel, who had followed their story closely. Families embraced loved ones, relief and joy washing over everyone. But amidst the celebration there was also sorrow. Jacob Hayes' name was spoken with reverence, his bravery honored by those who had heard of his selfless act. Kyle's loss was mourned as well, a reminder of the price they had paid to survive. Daniel addressed the gathered crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We came close to losing everything," he said, "but we held on because we believed in each other. Today we honor those we lost, and we celebrate the fact that we're here to tell this story." Later, as the crew began the long process of healing, Rachel found herself thinking about the alien ruins and the strange technology they had discovered. It was dangerous, yes, but it had also given them a fighting chance. She wondered if humanity would ever truly understand such advanced power, or if it was better left alone. Emily walked to a quiet corner of the station, gazing out at the stars. Despite everything, she felt a spark of curiosity igniting within her again. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, and though it was terrifying, it was also beautiful. She knew one thing for certain: she would never stop exploring. As the sun rose over Earth below, casting a golden glow across the sky, the survivors of the Odyssey carried their scars with pride. They had faced fire and fury, and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, knowing they had already proven that even in the darkest moments, hope could prevail.